Hello, my name's Damon. I'd love to tell you a little bit about my story of how I became a follower of Jesus. So I'll say a little bit about, my life before Jesus, how I met Jesus, and just a little bit about afterwards. So look, when I grew up, I think I had this strong need to achieve, and that gave me a sense of purpose and meaning and identity. So I'm the son of a policeman and of a teacher. Loving parents, had a wide extended family. I grew up in the eastern suburbs of Perth. My mum was a follower of Jesus and she set me on that path. So it gave me an idea about God. But really from a young age, my God, if you like, and my whole life ambition was to make the Australian Football League, which is like professional football in Australia. And in fact, I'd always been pretty driven to achieve, and by year 11 and 12, I was on track with meeting my AFL ambitions. I made the under-16 state squad. I played for Swan District's Colts. And by the start of my year 12, I was in peak condition. And to be honest, I've never been as strong or fit since. In fact, I had some scouts from an Australian Football League club take my details early in my year 12 season, and things were looking really good. But it wasn't the only thing that drove me, because being a teenager, playing football, there are a lot of parties, a lot of drinking. Drug and drinking culture was quite big. But because I was pretty disciplined and didn't want anything to get in the way of my fitness and ambitions, I kept away. But, it's pretty alluring nonetheless, the drinking and the culture, certainly for a testosterone-fueled young man. And I'd say my need for achievement also played out in the way I viewed the opposite sex. I guess one of my other obsessions growing up was probably girls. And, grew up at public schools all my life, and dating relationships were always a thing. Wasn't necessarily interested in commitment, but just having someone interested in me, picking someone up at a party, was sort of like another notch on the belt of achievement. But then I got what's known as the kissing disease, or glandular fever, which led to a year of having chronic fatigue. And I had to give away football. And I had just enough energy to make it through my year 12 year, and get a reasonable score, which was my backup option. The following year, I tried to make a comeback into football. That was my first year of university, but I tore a hip flexor muscle before my first game back. And I just didn't have the desire at that point to continue the constant cycle of injury, recovery, injury. It was a tough time. So that's a little bit about before meeting Jesus. So in fact, I need to jump back slightly to talk about how Jesus came into my life. So at the start of year 10, I started reading the Bible. So I was about 14 and a half, 15. And I started reading it daily, multiple times a day. And I was reading it because I was thinking, in this book, it must be the key to how to get a blessed life. But I totally missed how it was all about Jesus. In fact, my need for achievement played out in how I viewed God. I thought if I could just be good enough, then I thought God would bless my life, and when I died, let me into his heaven. Which is probably why when I went out partying on Saturday nights and then I would go to a church on a Sunday, I felt like the walls would fall in on me. And as my football ambitions were crushed, I guess I figured that God was punishing me for my youthful sins. And by my second year of university, I studied business and politics. Second year of university, about age 19, I was in a pretty lost and depressed state. My football dreams were dashed. I remember there was this girl who I really liked, but she had a boyfriend. And I felt quite lost. I had, lost a sense of purpose, meaning, or even identity. And I even considered ending my life, which, seemed preposterous because I actually had a really good family, I had a good life. But it was at this time that God came into my life in a big way. Now, at the time, I was at what we'd think of as quite a conservative church, and, anything outside of the normal, like anything miraculous, was just not a thing. But God unexpectedly, over a series of months, gave me what I can only call revelations or visions. And he revealed to me how sinful I was, how selfish and self-absorbed I was, how I'd completely missed the whole point of life. You know, I'd been living as if life was all about me and my ambitions, not realizing actually life is meant to be all about God and his glory and the good news about Jesus. And at that time, I began calling out to God to change me. I didn't even know what I needed. Now, in this stuffy old church, one Sunday, the fluoro lights were on, bright lights. There were uncomfortable pews I was sitting on, digging into my back. During communion, where we break the bread and drink the grape juice or the wine to remember Jesus' death for us on the cross. During communion, I was sitting there and I had this picture or vision of Jesus come into my mind. And I saw him laying on the cross when the cross was still laying on the ground. And he was laying there and he looked up at me and said, "Damon, I love you." And at that, I saw him stretch out his hands and I saw myself hammer the nails into his hands. But again, he just looked up at me and said, "Damon, I love you." And wow, that just totally broke me. You know, I would not be the same person again. And while I'd been on a journey for a while, for me, that was this huge moment where I finally repented or turned back towards God and I put my trust in Jesus alone. That was when my life changed, as I finally understood that Jesus willingly laid down his life for my sin. And it was my sin that nailed Jesus to the cross. And in fact, Jesus achieved what I never could. He lived the perfect life in my place, died the death I should have died for me to bring me back to God. And look, while he didn't perfect me, you know, I didn't get made perfect in that moment. That's an ongoing journey. Jesus changed me. I say the Holy Spirit came into my life. So that was when I met Jesus. Now, just jumping forward a little bit, what's my life look like post this time? Well, I'd say God turned my need for achievement and ambitions from myself to Jesus and his gospel. You know, straight away I was like, I've got to go to Bible college and become a missionary and, you know, give my life preaching the gospel. But I had a pastor who was very wise. I really appreciate him at the time, a church leader. He said to me, "Look, good desires, that's good, but I think you need to finish what you started. Finish what you started, your study, get a job, grow and mature, get some life experience." And I must say that was really good advice. When I was at uni, I studied business politics. I worked in the building industry. I had God call me out of a job. I was a business analyst, strategy area. I had an experience of God call me out of that. I went on a trip around different places in the world, checking out different works that God was doing through his people. And then I'd studied theology and education, and I pretty much been studying ever since and been involved in education and church-based ministry, including just finishing a research doctorate. And look, ministry for me, I've often done sort of tent-making type ministry where I've done some other job while I've been working in a church, often in education or business. I helped plant a church with a leader up in Perth while I was doing some teaching, and as the church grew, my role grew. I met my lovely wife, Becky, while I was studying at Bible college. And we've got 3 kids at the moment, and Lord's will be done if there's any more. And I currently serve in a church in Albany where I'm one of the pastors. I help run a sort of like a training hub or a college, run a few programs there. So hey, if you've listened to this, thanks for your time. And hopefully it's helpful to you to understand a bit about meeting Jesus. So thank you.